Hello and welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. I'm your host, Andrew Moses. With me today, I have a very, very special guest, best-selling author, Damon West. Damon, good to have you on the show.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for having me on the show, man. And I got to tell you, man, I love the story behind Pull the Tarp, man. That's a hell of a philosophy, and I think that more people should subscribe to that way of thinking, man. I love that everybody has to pull their weight. I love it.
Well, I love your story, Damon, and for my audience, I want to, give them a little sense as to a bit of your story, and we'll get into that. But let's go back a bit. In 2008, you're sentenced to 65 years in a maximum prison as a result of some burglary crimes, that pertain to your meth addiction at the time, and how you were funding that addiction. You go to prison. About 7.5 years later, you're granted a lifetime parole. And during your time in prison, you learned quite a bit about transforming the culture there, transforming your life. And now you're spreading that inspirational story, your inspirational mantra of being a coffee bean to the world, to corporations, to teams. And I want to get into all of that, both books, The Change Agent, The Coffee Bean. But where I really want to start is a special relationship for you. You have been spreading these inspirational messages to companies, teams, organizations all over the world. But you have a really special relationship with Clemson football head coach Dabo Swinney, and you've had a chance to learn from him and also educate his program on your story and leadership. And why don't you start? Let's start with a little discussion about your relationship with Dabo and how that all evolved.
Man, so, it's a story I tell to companies all the time. I tell it to a lot of salespeople, man. And the moral to the story is always ask. Never be afraid to ask the question. I mean, the worst thing can happen when asking the question is you get told no, right? And so, but you never know where that yes is going to come from. And it's a story about how my life went on a different course one night. This is January of 2017. I'd been out of prison about 14 months at this point. And, I'm on parole the rest of my life, and I've got this great story, man. Played college football at North Tech, played Division I quarterback, worked on Wall Street, worked in Congress, got hooked on meth, broke into a lot of houses, made a lot of victims, got sent to prison for life, but transformed my life in there. And I want to tell the story to college football programs all over the country because I feel that I have a currency with college football players because I've been there, man. But I don't have any access to the college football world. And college football has changed in the 20 years since I last took a snap at North Texas. So my buddy calls me up. He works for KHOU, the big CBS station in Houston. He calls me up. I'm living in Beaumont. I'm about 90 miles away. And he says, hey, I've got a press pass to the Bear Bryant Coaching Award tonight. And the Bear Bryant Coaching Award is it's a Coach of the Year award they give out to the best coach in college football every year. It's in Houston. And he said, I'll sneak you in the back door and give you this press pass. Do you want to go? And I'm like, heck yeah, I want to go. And I live 90 miles away, right? So after I work at this law firm, and after work, I go to my house and I put on the best hand-me-down suit I have because I got all hand-me-down clothes this. I just got out of prison 14 months ago, right? So I throw on the best suit I could find. I drive 90 miles to Houston. I get to the Toyota Center and I hit the ground running, man. And I'm getting to talk to all these coaches in America, man. Penn State's there, Wisconsin is there, USC, PJ Fleck is there. And I'm getting to meet these guys, shake all their hands, and give them my pitch, my elevator pitch. 30 seconds, the best stuff I can come up with, man. And every single coach I talk to tells me no. In one form or another, they tell me no. Most of them are very, very polite about it. Like, hey, don't call us, we'll call you, kid. And they're moving on. Man, I'm 7 of the 8 coaches down. I'm in the corner of the Toyota Center, and I'm licking my wounds, man. And I'm sitting there telling myself, Damon, that last coach is going to tell you no. You might as well just go home now. But then that voice kicked in, the competitor, that said, hey, man, no, you're not going anywhere, man. What kind of motivational speaker would you be if you just quit? Who the hell wants to listen to that guy? And man, you survived prison, man. You survived way more of this. You're not going home. That last coach is going to tell you no to your face before you leave. So, man, I watched and I literally stalked Dabo Swinney throughout this whole room. And he's the hardest one to get to because he had just won the national championship 2 nights before, man. Everybody wants a piece of Dabo's time. But when I find my opening, I see it and I take it and I pounce on Dabo, man. And I'm giving Dabo, man, about 10 minutes of conversation in 1 minute, man. I mean, I've got him up against the wall. He said it was like getting a drink of water from a fire hydrant, And after that elevator pitch was over, man, Dabo's like, hey, you got a card on you? And I hand him my card. And Dabo snatches the card. He says, hey, thanks, we'll be in touch. And he takes off running. And I'm like, oh, that was awful. But I put the night out of my mind, Andrew, because I did everything I could. I left it all on the field, man. So I slept well that night. And I moved on and, looking for the next opportunity. A few months later, man, I get an email from the director of football operations from Clemson, Mike Dewey. And he says, hey, Damon, Coach Swinney said he met you at an award show in Houston. I'd love to have you come talk to the team. Do you have August 1st open? And I'm like, dude, do I have August 1st open? I got every first open, man. I got nothing going on in my life. So August 1st, 2017, I go talk to the Clemson Tigers, the defending national champions of college football that year. And after my presentation's over, Dabo's got me up against the wall. And now he's sitting there, Dabo's excited. He's really animated. He's like, man, that's the most amazing story I've ever heard. I've never seen my players respond like that before. He says, have you been to Alabama yet? And I'm like, no, Dabo, I've been to Clemson, man. I hadn't been to Alabama. How am I going to get to Alabama? He said, well, we'll see about that. He said, I just texted Nick Saban from the back of the room and told him what I was watching. And, man, when I landed in Houston the next morning, Andrew, I had a voicemail and a text message from the director of football operations from the University of Alabama. And this guy said to me, hey, we'll see you in Tuscaloosa in 3 weeks. You're on, man. And just like that, Dabo kicked the door open to college football. But Dabo wasn't done yet, man. The next year, another August later, I'm at my desk at work again. And now it's a phone call. On the other end of that phone is a guy named John Gordon. And, man, I know who John Gordon is. John Gordon's an energy bus guy, man. He sold 4 million books. I follow him on social media. But how the hell does John Gordon know Damon West? So I asked him, John, how do you know who I am? He said, Dabo Swinney. He said, Dabo Swinney can't quit talking about you and that coffee bean story. He said, Damon, let's write a book. We'll call it The Coffee Bean. He said it'll be a bestseller. The world needs this coffee bean message right now. And this is July of 2019 when the coffee bean comes out and becomes a bestseller. And John's telling me, he's calling a shot that the world needs the coffee bean message right now. And if I would have left that event that night in January of 2017, man, if I would have just gone home and said, you know what, Dabo Swinney's going to tell you no anyway because everybody else did, then you would never have heard of Damon West and you would never have heard of the coffee bean. So it's just crazy. So you never know where that one yes is going to come from, but that one yes changed my life. It changed the course of my life, and it can change yours too. All you got to do is never be afraid to ask.
It's amazing how one thing could change the trajectory of someone's life, and there's a lot of great things that you've done that have changed the course of your life. I want to go back, a little bit to talk about the relationship with your parents. You talk in the Change Agent about your relationship with your parents, and in particular, some of the remarks that your mom made to you as you were heading off to the 65-year sentence in that maximum security prison in Texas. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship you had with your parents and what your mom said to you that day?
Yeah, man, I came from a great family, man. I grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, and my dad was a sports writer for 50 years. He was the first sports writer down in this part of Texas to put black athletes on the front page of the sports page. First time he did it was 1971. I mean, people were throwing bricks through his windows, cutting his tires, doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, because he put a black guy on the front page of the sports page, right? My mom was a nurse, and so I grew up with a very socially conscious family, great family. Got an older brother, younger brother. And so whenever I'm at that trial in May 18th, 2009, and the jury has just sentenced me to life in prison, my parents are devastated, man. I mean, and my parents are still married to this day, Andrew. I didn't come from a broken home, man. I don't have a lot of the excuses that so many people have in America for how they grew up. My upbringing was great, man. I had every opportunity and all the privilege you can think of. But I was an addict, and I committed a lot of crimes when I was in my addiction. And my parents sat there and saw a jury sentence me to life in prison after 6 days of overwhelming evidence of my guilt. And so after the trial was over, Dallas County gave my parents one last visit with me, and it was a 5-minute visit. I'm behind a bulletproof glass. They're talking to me. My mom is talking to me. My dad is just in stunned disbelief. He's stoic. And my mom she says, baby, debts in life demand to be paid. She said, you just got hit with one hell of a bill from the state of Texas. She said, but you did the things they said you did at that trial, Damon, so you have to go and pay that debt to society. She said, but you owe your father and I a debt too, because we gave you all the opportunity, love, and support to be anything you want to be in this life, but this is how you repay it. She said, it's not going to work. She said, we raised you in Port Arthur, Texas, a giant melting pot of a city, gave you a great moral compass, which you chose to not use. She said, so here's the debt you're going to pay to us. When you go to prison, you will not get in one of these white hate groups, one of these Aryan Brotherhood type gangs, because you're scared because you're the minority in there. She said, it's not going to work. You were never raised to see race, and you won't start now. She said, you will not get Any tattoos when you're inside that prison? And man, so my mom said, Damon, no gangs, no tattoos. She said, you come back as the man we raised or do not come back at all. I mean, that was tough love coming from my mom too. And so I agreed to this, obviously, but I had no clue what I agreed to. What does a white middle-class guy in America know about the penitentiary, right? So I did what I thought was the best thing to do. And I went around asking every guy in Dallas County Jail that knew something about the penitentiary, guys that had been to the pen, how am I going to survive? And every guy I talked to, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, they're telling me the same thing. Man, you got to get into a game. You can't survive without a game. And you're going to the worst part of the prison system where everybody in the building you live on has a life sentence. They call it the life sentence building. Man, make your life easy, Wes, get into a game. But there was this one guy, Andrew, this guy, he was an older African-American man named Mr. Jackson. He was probably in his 60s. He's what you call a career criminal, man, a seasoned convict, been to prison 4 or 5 times, in and out of prison all his life. But he was a real positive guy. And Mr. Jackson was smiling all the time. He was the most positive guy I've ever seen, man. So one morning he comes up to me and he says, Wes, I've been watching how you're dealing with these knuckleheads and these dummies, talking about you got to get into a gang. He said, do not listen to these fools. He said, but what you need to understand, Wes, is that prison is like a pot of boiling water. And he said, anything we put in that pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat, the pressure inside that pot. He said, I'm going to put 3 things in that pot of boiling water and watch how they change: a carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. So he walks me through it. He said, if I put a carrot into that pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, what happens to the carrot? I said, well, it turns soft, Mr. Jackson. He said, that's right. He said, the carrot goes into prison hard, but the water, prison, changes that carrot, turns it soft. He said, the carrot got beat, it got robbed, it got raped, may got killed. He said, you don't want to be the carrot. He said, what about the egg? I said, well, the egg turns hard, like a hard-boiled egg. He said, that's right. He said, the egg has a shell that protects him physically, but inside, that egg is not okay, because inside that soft liquid core, his heart has become hardened. He said, if your heart becomes hardened, you're incapable of giving or receiving love. He said, if you're incapable of giving and receiving love, you would become institutionalized and you will not come back as someone your parents recognize. And he said, what about that coffee bean? And I had no clue, Andrew. I didn't know what happened to a coffee bean in boiling water, man. So I told him I didn't know. Mr. Jackson said, if I put a coffee bean into that pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you have to change the name of the water to coffee. Because he said the coffee bean, the smallest of these 3 things, he said, small like you, had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot. He said, everybody in life puts out energy, negative or positive. He said, whatever kind of energy you put out, you attract back. It's called the law of attraction. He said, so if you want to walk around prison all the time with a mean mug on your face and a scowl, you want to look hard, he said, what you'll actually do is attract that same kind of inmate, the same kind of person into your life. Be a very dangerous, even deadly endeavor where you're going. He said, well, Wes, if you walk around that prison with a smile on your face and you let those guys know they're not getting to you, no matter what they do, they can't get to you. He said, you will change that prison from the inside out. And he said, the best part about it is the other coffee beans in prison, the other positive inmates will find you because of your energy. And the last thing Mr. Jackson told me before I got on that prison bus, I got shipped off to prison. He looked at me, Andrew, and he said, West, go out there and go be a coffee bean. And I left for prison on that prison bus, transport, chained to another human being, scared out of my mind about what the world was about to go into. And rightly so. Prison was the most awful, dangerous, violent place I've ever been in my life. But I thought about that coffee bean. It was like a secret that I had with me in my pocket. Because if Jackson was shooting me straight, if he was leveling with me on this deal, then that means that the power inside this situation I'm going into, or any situation, wasn't on the outside influence. It wasn't on the institution of prison. The power wasn't even in the guard's hands. The power wasn't even in the hands of the other inmates around me. The power was inside me. And if I didn't let them have that power over me, then I could not only survive what I'm about to go into, but I could thrive in there. And man, I bought into that. I bought into that coffee bean mentality. And right now, that coffee bean mentality is so important in what's going on in the world right now. The whole world's in a pot of boiling water, especially this country, with coronavirus, with the Black Lives Matter movement and how that's, finally gaining some traction in America. And people are starting to wake up to the realities that blacks have had to live with, all their lives in the existence in America. The world is in a pot of boiling water right now. But we need to stop, pause, and look back and realize that the power is inside each and every one of us to make this change. And that's how we're going to come out on the other side of this thing, is we're going to make those changes from inside us, not from the outside influences.
So the power is inside each of us to change an environment, and you're living proof of that. So I want to talk a little bit about that some more. And you and I have talked about that. The name of this show is Everybody Pulls the Tarp. And it's built around a philosophy that I have, that great teams are powered by individuals who contribute far beyond the boundaries of their job description. People who are willing to do whatever it takes, bring the work ethic, come early, stay late, and put in the energy, the positive energy to change their team, change their company, change their organization, change their community, whatever it is. So talk a little bit about the impact. You talk to teams, college sports teams all the time, community organizations, companies. What is the impact that one person who's willing to do whatever it takes, who's willing to smile, like you say, who's willing to bring that positivity? How does that go about starting that positive movement?
Well, it creates a chain reaction. One person has the power, just like in prison. What I'm talking about is not a bunch of theoretical stuff. It's something I read in a book or something I heard from someone else, or something I saw in a movie. I lived it, man. I went inside of a maximum security level 5 penitentiary in the state of Texas, one of the most harsh environments on the planet, and not only transformed myself, but I transformed the entire world around me in there. And I'm one guy, but I had the power to positively impact the world around me inside there. And what I found out is that one person's body language can change the entire atmosphere in a room, because, if you have positive body language, people are reading your body language for cues all the time. Sometimes your body language, reading someone's body language says, don't go near that person. Other times it says, hey man, I want to be around that person. And that's what you need to have is the latter, where it's saying, hey man, that's a positive person. Smiling, man. I tell people all the time, your smile is powerful. What it does is it unlocks inside you that negative stuff that's going on in there. And because a real smile, releases endorphins, makes you feel better. There's science behind smiling. But what it also does is the other people that see you smile, they start smiling back. And maybe not all of them at first, but it happens. People see you, they smile, they know when you're coming, they know it's going to be something good, makes them feel good, they want to walk in your direction. And then you create these rooms full of smiling, positive people. And what happens with negative people in a room full of smiling, positive people is you kind of trap them into they've got two choices in this scenario. In a room full of smiling, positive people, whether that be a boardroom, a locker room, or a prison pod that you live on. In a room full of smiling, positive people, negative people have two choices. They can either, one, get with the program and become positive too. And most negative people, most people do this because people have an inherent need to want to belong and be loved. It's what we're made up of as humans. We want to be part of the herd, part of the pack. But there's going to be people out there, these truly negative people, the ones that I call the hardcore, hard-boiled eggs, the ones you can't penetrate. No matter how much you try to find out what's bothering them inside, you can't bust through to them. And these people in a room full of smiling, positive people, they get out of the room. They leave, man. They're looking for a different room to be in. They don't want to be around that. They quit their jobs. They quit hanging around the water cooler because no one's over there anymore to gossip with them, But that's because you've created a culture of positivity around your entire workforce, around your team, around your environment. And you leave these people, these negative people, these truly negative people, nowhere to go. And they'll quit. They'll leave before anything else.
You also talk about working out, and not always just in the sense of working out physically, which I'm sure you've done your share of as an athlete and in prison, but working out in other ways, spiritually, mentally. Talk about that for a minute and how that sharpens everything for you and others that you teach.
That's a great question, because people, especially during the quarantine, people, I spoke to probably 7,500 different groups on Zoom calls, and it gave away for free, man, because about day 2 of the coronavirus still, I'm sitting here at home and I'm not very uncertain about what the future holds. And my co-author and good friend, John Gordon, he talks about fear and faith. And he said, fear and faith have more in common than just the letter F. He said they both believe in a future that hadn't happened yet. Fear is a negative future that hadn't happened yet, and faith is a positive future that hasn't happened yet. So, but a lot of times we get into this mode of fear. We fear what the future holds. And day 2 of this deal, I didn't know what the future held. I just know that I was getting phone call after phone call canceling events. And I was angry. I went from being the egg to being the carrot. But man, about day 2 of it, I'm like, you know what? You're not going to be like this, Damon. You're going to go out there. You're going to find a way to be useful to other people. And I got with a friend of mine named Lisa Spain. That's a consultant. And we started putting together these Zoom calls and giving it away for free. Because I had to live that coffee bean philosophy. It was the ultimate coffee bean test for a guy like me. Can you put your money where your mouth is? Put your philosophy where your mouth is. And part of that philosophy of being a coffee bean is working out in 3 areas every day: spiritually, mentally, and physically, to be a complete person. When I was in prison, Andrew, I saw guys in there that could play in the NFL, play in the NBA. These guys were stack houses of just talent and muscle, out there on the rec yard.
Yeah.
But what they didn't work out was their minds. They didn't work out their hearts, man. And that was the difference, man, because you can't just be someone who works out physically and you don't work out spiritually or mentally, man. You're not a well-rounded person. To be the most well-rounded, complete human being possible, a human being that is capable of being vulnerable and showing empathy and being strong at the same time, then you have to work out in those 3 areas. Like a spiritual workout, I get up every day and I say the same prayer to God I've been praying since I got into recovery in prison, 10 years ago, man. And my prayer is simple. And it says, hey, God, put in front of me today what you need me to do today for you. And let me recognize it when I see it, because I don't want to miss that. So that's it. I don't ask for any of this other stuff that's going on in my life, Andrew. No health or wealth or happiness, none of that stuff, because I got to know that if I'm taking care of what God needs me to do, that God will take care of my needs. Maybe not my wants, but my needs. Needs and wants are 2 different things. That's a spiritual workout for me. And another spiritual workout that I do every day is to hold myself accountable and talk to God at the end of each day, man. I start my day off with a conversation with God spiritually and end it spiritually at night. And when I talk about God, man, look, I'm Christian, and I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, but that's, everybody has their choices of what they go with. I'm not trying to push anybody's religion here, but I am telling you, be grounded spiritually to something out there, because it's a big universe out there, But I have my conversation with God at the end of each night, and I say, hey, man, how was I today? Was I a good person today? What did I do to put back in the stream of life? Do I owe someone an apology? And I also want to know, do I owe someone forgiveness? Because that forgiveness thing is a 2-way street, Andrew. And the spiritual workout for me is talking to God and finding out who I got to forgive. I don't want to forgive people. I hate forgiving people, man. I like holding on to my resentments, but I can't. Resentment is a very dangerous thing for a guy like me. And I don't want to take a resentment into another day with me, man. That's a bad thing. That ruins your entire day. When, I can lay in bed at night and think of who I need to forgive and let it go, man. Because I want to be forgiven for the stuff I do. I have to be prepared to give that out 100% of the time, because I've done a lot of people wrong. And then mentally working out, man, it's about what kind of books I read, what kind of videos do I watch, what kind of websites do I go to, what am I feeding myself mentally? Because we are what we eat. We are what we eat means more than just about food. It means, what do you feed yourself? What do you put in this brain up here? And physically working out, man, look, that goes from everything from getting exercise every day to eating the right foods to getting enough rest. My life before the coronavirus, man, I was on planes 4 days a week, and I was flying all over the place, and I never stopped. One of the things that left early on was my daily workouts. I didn't do that anymore. But the coronavirus gave me a chance to get back to my daily workouts, and I've enjoyed that aspect of it. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, I'm ready to get back to work, but it was nice to hit the reset button. I told people everywhere I could throughout the coronavirus stuff, and even before that about my first cellmate in prison, this guy named Carlos. And Carlos was a little bank robber from San Antonio, looked about 5'2", a little Hispanic guy from San Antonio. But don't let Carlos' size fool you. Carlos was lethal, man. I always want to add that in. Carlos was a lethal little dude, but he was a real good guy. But Carlos told me, when I first got to prison, he said the first rule about doing time is you have to do your time. You can't let your time do you. And that means you have to decide what's going to go into your days, man. You have to decide what you're going to pack into the stream of life every single day, because if you don't, your day will decide for you. And so that's kind of the philosophy I live by, Andrew, is working out every day spiritually, mentally, and physically. And it's just, one of the ways of being a coffee bean.
It's such fascinating stuff, right? In terms of how you've applied all these lessons that you learned in prison to really any walk of life, team, organization, company, and you're sharing that inspirational message with the world every single day. It is absolutely phenomenal. One of my guests on this show just a few weeks ago was head coach Tom Allen at Indiana University, in their football head coach. And he has a philosophy that you're really a product of the books you read, the music that you listen to, and the people you hang out with. And it's a really interesting parallel you bring up there. But let's stay on the topic of college football coaches, and let's go back to your relationship with Dabo and maybe some of these other coaches a little bit. What is, you get to interact with these coaches at an elite level. what makes somebody like Dabo Swinney so great at what he does?
There's several things that makes Dabo so great, and and the thing about Dabo is that the culture he's created there. He took over in 2008 as the head coach there, but he's created a culture there that other companies, Fortune 100s, Fortune 500s, other sports teams, they go there to study what's going on at Clemson. And the thing that Dabo's done so well at Clemson is one, he's authentic, and he does what he says he's going to do. And that's what you have to be consistent when you're going to be a leader. And people generally in life are looking to be led, Andrew. And that's just, there's not everybody's a leader, and not most of us are not leaders. Most of us are followers. And I think all of us play the role of follower at some point in our life anyway, right? But some people are leaders, and people want to be led. And in the absence of good leadership, people will follow a bad leader. Just look throughout history. You don't have to look in too distant history right now to see what happens when you don't have strong leadership. And in the absence of good, strong leadership, people follow that bad leader. It's like a thirsty man going through the desert, and he sees a mirage, right? And he's thirsty. If he's thirsty enough, when he sees that mirage, he may drink the sand, and the sand will kill him. And that's what happens whenever we follow the wrong leaders and we don't have the right belief systems. But what Dabo has done at Clemson is he's created, a philosophy of love, of service, of humility, servant leadership. Dabo is real big on servant leadership, and servant leadership is helping other people achieve their goals in life, helping raise other people up to a different station of life. He's, because he believes that when we're helping other people, that's when we're at our best. But one of the things Dabo does so well that I don't know if a lot of leaders have picked up on or understand, because you look, when I'm about to tell you this, imagine applying it to some other college football coaches or other coaches, period, is Dabo is vulnerable. He's very vulnerable to his men. And that vulnerability is a strength, Andrew. It's not a weakness. You can be vulnerable and still be strong. I was vulnerable going through prison, but I was strong enough that people knew that if they tested me, they were going to get in a fight. And chances were real good I was going to lose. I lost most of my fights in prison, but I would always fight, But I'm vulnerable too. I'm approachable. And that's what Dabo has done so well. And I saw an example of this. Look, this was this past August. I was speaking to his team, and Dabo got up after the presentation, was standing there with me, and he started talking about something very personal to him. And I won't go into detail what the topic was, but it was so personal to him that he started tearing up talking about it. He got very emotional, something to do with his family. And I started watching every football player in that room, and this is the national champion Clemson Tigers, man. These guys all zero in on Dabo, man. Every set of eyeballs in that room is now locked in on him. They're not looking at me, the speaker, anymore, which is typically, these guys are going to lock in on the speaker, come up and congratulate me afterwards and walk out of the room. They're locked in on Dabo. And he's emotional, and tears are trickling out of his eyes. And they're watching every tear fall from his eyes. And when he broke that meeting, every single football player in that room swarmed Dabo, man. They just all circled up around their coach, around Dad, man, because they love Dabo like a father. And they all wanted to hug him to make sure he was okay, man. And some of these guys are emotional themselves because Dabo's emotional. Can you imagine some other coaches in college football doing that? Some of these other great football coaches that you hear about and see that compete for the national championship every year, getting emotional and breaking down and crying in front of their dude, no. But what I saw in that room, those guys Dabo brought them closer, man. But he's authentic, man. That's one of the things about it. He's authentic and real, and he gives those guys feel like they're on equal footing. Dabo told me a story, and I reminded Dabo of this past week before he was going to go out and do that speech that he gave Saturday night. I said, Dabo, you told me a story one time when I was in your office, and you told me about, he said, if I could bottle up what we do here at Clemson, and distribute it to every American, we wouldn't have race problems in America. And this is over a year ago. He says this to me, man. He says, because for 4 years, these guys come to this program, and they sweat together, they bleed together, they go to battle together, but most of all, they love together. They become brothers here. They become best men, best friends. He said for 4 years, they're insulated from what America is really like. And, he said, if we could bottle that up and give it to everybody in this country, we would instantly be better. And, that always stuck with me. I've told that story to coaches all over the place. And when I tell that story, people are like, wow, man, that's true. And that's the kind of culture you want, man, that culture of inclusiveness.
It is a powerful culture that he's created and that teams create. And I want to let you go in a minute, Damon, but first, you have another phrase that I love. You've got a ton. You have a phrase: "If it is to be, it's up to me." Talk about that. Talk about that for a minute, because I want my audience to hear your perspective on that. It's so inspirational.
Yeah, if it is to be, it is up to me. It's 20 letters, 10 words, perhaps the most powerful sentence in the English language. And I first heard this when I was playing college football at the University of North Texas, where the coach I was playing for at the time said it in a meeting, and it stuck with me. It was one of those speakers that says something to me, and I wasn't a real receptive audience back when I was 20 years old in college. I was about as wild as it got, but that stuck with me, man, because that's a permission statement, man. That tells you to get up and go do something. That's where that free will is. The thing about faith, whatever your belief system is in faith and all that, I believe in God, but I also know that I have free will, and that's where the free will is. At 20 letters and 10 words, that's free will. That's powerful. It says you to get up and go do something. And that was kind of a mantra I lived by in prison and in life since then, that if it is to be, it's up to me, means I've got to get up and go do this, man. I've got to go meet God halfway and get up and do my share of the work. And that's like you're talking about, man. Everybody pulls the tarp. It's the same mantra as that, because if it is to be, it's up to me, means, man, I've got to get up and go do my share to make this thing work, this thing called life.
Everybody's got to get up and do their share. Damon West, you sure are doing your share. I've got to give a plug. These are two of my favorites. So Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Coffee Bean by Damon West and John Gordon. And then you can't miss The Change Agent by Damon as well. These are two phenomenal reads. My audience knows I love to read. I'm always reading. These are two reads that you won't want to put down, and that you are sure to enjoy. Damon, it has been an absolute pleasure to follow your story, the impact that you're having on the world, and to those around you. You are paying down that debt that your mom talked about. There is no question. It's been such an honor to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
Hey, Andrew, thanks a lot for having me on, man. You gave me a chance to be useful. When that parole officer came to visit me in 2015 to see if I was going to make parole, she looked at my file, Andrew. She looked at my background, all the things I'd done in prison. And she's like, look, we don't see a lot of Damon West come through. She said, I'm going to be honest with you. She said, so given all that, she said, I've got one question for you. And look, I'm sitting here going, shit, man, what is this going to be? One question, decides whether or not I go home. She said, if you could be remembered for being anything in this life, she said, give it to me in just one word, go. And man, Andrew, because I was a coffee bean, because I knew that, I want to control what I think, say, feel, and do, and that I was a servant leader, and then that I did work out every day, spiritually, mentally, and physically, and that I worked hard every day at being positive and using positive body language and transforming myself in there and the world around me. I had her answer for her. I was a coffee bean, and I told her, useful. Ma'am, I just want to be useful, and I can be useful out there, or I could be useful in this prison, or I could be useful out in that world, finding those coffee beans. So, Andrew, thank you for allowing me to be useful today, brother.
Thank you, Damon. It's been an absolute privilege to have you on this show. Take care, stay safe, and hope to see you out there soon in person. Once we get out there a bit.
Boy, honestly, me too, man. Hope to see you soon.
All right, take care.
All right, bye.